Finland is known for its saunas, reindeer, the northern lights, and, believe it or not, Nokia. And apparently Finnish people are the happiest people in the world. But how do we define happiness? And what exactly is happiness? Do Finnish people really know something that maybe the rest of the world doesn't? As the Finnish people say, nu otetaan selvää. The happiest country in the world is a ranking determined by the World Happiness Report. This is an organization that has been measuring happiness since 2002. They use global survey data to report how people measure their own lives in more than 150 countries worldwide. They measure happiness by 6 pillars. These are perception of corruption, generosity, freedom to make your own life choices, a healthy life expectancy, social support, and the GDP per capita. People are asked to rate their lives based on these 6 pillars. All these questions have a different weight, and in the end, everything is put on a scale from 0 to 10 with these 6 pillars to create a nice and easy to read overview. They also created a country named Dystopia. Dystopia is an imaginary country with the world's least happy people. The purpose of having this dystopia is to have a benchmark against which all other countries can be favorably compared. No country can perform more poorly than Dystopia. This is how the World Happiness Report does it. It doesn't mean that this is the set definition or the only true way to measure happiness. We'll take a closer look at the Finnish people in a minute, because I personally do think they have something that other countries maybe don't. And I think this could be the secret to their happiness. But first, let's take a closer look at this word, happiness. Can you even measure pure happiness? Looking at the top 5 countries, we can see they all have similarities. They are all transparent and democratic countries where healthcare is either free or at least easily accessible for every citizen. The GDP per capita is way above the worldwide average, which means everyone contributes significantly to the economy. And people are free to make their own choices and, generally speaking, do as they please. But is that really what happiness is? If we measure happiness by these standards, how can people possibly be happy in countries like Afghanistan, Lebanon, or Zimbabwe, who are at the bottom of the World Happiness Report? There's a theory called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is the theory that all people have an inborn desire to be self-actualized. Or as Maslow said it, what a man can be, he must be. In order to fulfill this ultimate desire, a number of more basic needs must be met. The need for food and shelter, safety, love, and self-esteem. But this theory is a little controversial, mainly because Maslow drew a lot of his conclusions based on personal observation. Now, I do think he was onto something here. I just don't agree with all these things being needs that have to be met in order to achieve happiness. But what if you change the title from Hierarchy of Needs to Hierarchy of Comfort? All of a sudden, these levels become optional. Sure, if you have no shelter, no food, no love, you won't be very comfortable. But it's not a necessity in order to achieve happiness. The 6 pillars of the World Happiness Report are actually very similar to Maslow's needs. High GDP per capita means economic prosperity. This provides basic shelter and food for most people living in the country. Low corruption, a good life expectancy, and accessible healthcare directly contribute to a person's feeling of safety. Social support is being able to count on your friends and family in times of need, which falls under being loved. Generosity in the 6 pillars is the willingness to donate to charity and help other people. Self-esteem in Maslow's hierarchy is the feeling of being needed by other people. So looking at it like this, the World Happiness Report is actually more of a World Comfort Report. I do think all people strive towards comfort. Comfort makes us feel good, and that's why achieving shelter and food, safety and love is something that everyone wants. Comfort creates happiness, but comfort is not happiness. If you start seeing comfort as happiness, the moment that comfort falls away, the happiness fades with it. But what if you have none of that comfort? Can a person even be happy? The best example I could think of was Man's Search for Meaning, a book written by Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the Holocaust. Frankl and his fellow prisoners were stripped of everything they had, family, possessions, health, their names, and even the hairs on their head. But there was one thing the Nazis couldn't take away: the last of a human's freedom, the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. It's what Stoic philosophers called inner discourse, or guiding principle. No matter where life puts us, no matter how difficult our current situation might be, we always have the inner freedom to decide our attitude. Choosing how to react to suffering gave Frankl a deep sense of meaning. This was his light in the darkness and helped him to endure and eventually survive his time in the concentration camp. And this sense of meaning, the sense of purpose, no matter the circumstances, is often seen as true happiness. All the way on the other side of the world from where Frankl was held captive lies Lumbini, in what we now know as Nepal. This is said to be the birthplace of the Buddha. Buddhism, maybe more than any other religion, is often associated with happiness. The Buddha taught that there are three kinds of dukkha. Dukkha is usually translated as suffering, but a more literal translation is life does not satisfy. The first kind is physical and mental pain from the inevitable stresses of life, such as old age, sickness, and death. The second is the distress we feel as a result of change, like the pain of failing to get what we want, or suddenly losing what we hold dear. The third kind is an existential kind of suffering. It's simply being afraid of being human and existing in this massive universe. And at the root of all dukkha lies craving, or attachment. We go through life grasping and clinging on to all things that we think we desire and avoiding things we dislike, only to discover that what we just grabbed onto only provides momentary relief. Our desires are never enough and never ending. In Buddhism, practicing the Noble Eightfold Path is the only way to happiness. That way, you develop a happiness that isn't dependent on external factors, but instead comes from your mind and doesn't come and go as circumstances change. This doesn't mean suffering doesn't exist, because it does. There will always be sickness, death, and other forms of pain. But just like Viktor Frankl, your meaning, purpose, true happiness, or whatever you want to call it, lies in the way you deal with life, and is something that no desire in the world can fulfill. Finally, let's end this video by talking about the Finns, because I do think Finland has something special that earns them the top ranking in happiness. Insider interviewed multiple Finns back in 2020 about happiness, and a word that was mentioned a lot was content. And that's interesting, because contentment means to be satisfied with the things you have. It means you're not constantly chasing your desires in a never-ending circle of greed, like taught in Buddhism. It means to have an overall state of peace and happiness, no matter the circumstances in your life. Now, I highly doubt that Finnish kids are taught about Buddhism and Viktor Frankl, but maybe growing up in a country with dark, cold, and long winters somehow teaches people to accept things as they are. Finns embrace the cold of an icy lake after enjoying the heat of a sauna. They appreciate a hot cup of coffee on dark winter days. And during midsummer, the Finns celebrate the light of the sun, following the months of winter darkness. Now add to that Finland is also a country that scores very high on these 6 pillars of the World Happiness Report. So it's also a very comfortable country, where people's needs are being met. And I think being content with life, while also being comfortable, is what gives Finland such a unique formula to happiness. Or maybe it's just the vodka after all.
Nyt tuu pois. Nyt Virtanen! Nyt lopeta toi hölmöily täällä.
I want to end this video with a poem written by a very famous Finnish poet.
Kel onni on, se onnen kätkeköön. Kel aarre on, se aarteen peittäköön. Ja olkoon onnellinen onnestaan, ja rikas riemustansa yksin vaan. Ei onni kärsi katseit ihmisten, kel onni on, se käyköön korpehen. Ja eläköhön hiljaa hiljaa vaan, ja hiljaa iloitkohon onnestaan.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like. I also read all the comments, so if you have anything you would want to see next, or you want to leave some feedback, feel free to let me know.